Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the meeting. We are ready to begin. Would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. De Silva?
Here.
Mrs. Gillis?
Here.
Mr. Valentine?
Here.
Mrs. Messick?
Here.
And Mrs. Rigby.
Here. Pledge of Allegiance, Mr. Boney. Okay, approval of the regular minutes. It is recommended that the board approve the February 10th regular meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Valentine. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Gillis. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis?
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Messick?
Yes.
And Mrs. Rigby.
Yes. Motion passes 5-0. Approval of the special meeting minutes. It's recommended that the board approve the February 10th special meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. De Silva. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Messick. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Messick?
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis?
Yes.
Mr. Valentine?
Yes.
And Mrs. Rigby.
Yes. Motion passes 5-0. Approval of the regular work session minutes. It is recommended that the board approve the February 24th regular work session meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Valentine. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. De Silva. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis?
Yes.
Mrs. Messick?
Yes.
And Mrs. Rigby.
Yes. Motion passes 5-0. And approval of this evening's agenda. It is recommended that the board approve this evening's agenda as presented. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Messick. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Gillis. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Messick?
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis?
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Mr. Valentine?
Yes.
And Mrs. Rigby.
Yes. Motion passes 5-0. Awards and recognitions.
Mr. Boney.
Good evening, everyone. The Golden Shamrock Award, which started in 1990, was founded by Ed Puknaki. Welcome, Ed. An active community member in Dublin as well as a business owner. This award was created to recognize staff members in our district who have made outstanding contributions and have had a significant impact through the work that they do each and every day. Tonight, we have 2 award winners. And at this time, I'd like to ask Wayne Sy, Assistant Principal at Dublin Kaufman High School, to come to the podium to say a few words about our first award winner, Mary Ann Thiessen. Mr. Sy. Oh. Sorry, everyone. Dan Stoll will be the first one tonight.
Dr. Marshausen, Mr. Kern, and members of the board, thank you for your commitment to celebrating outstanding staff members of the Dublin City Schools through the Golden Shamrock Award. My name is Wayne Sy, and I'm honored to serve as one of the assistant principals at Dublin Kaufman High School. Tonight, I am fortunate to have the opportunity to present to you the Golden Shamrock Award winner, Dublin Kaufman Theater Director, Mr. Dan Stolwell. Dan is an extraordinary teacher whose passion for theater resonates deeply with every student he teaches. His commitment to their success is truly unparalleled. Dan's classroom is a place where students not only develop their acting skills, but also cultivate a profound appreciation for the arts. Dan's lessons are engaging, personalized, and thoughtfully designed to inspire creativity and confidence in each of his students. It is clear from the heartfelt words of his colleagues that Dan is deeply respected, not just for his expertise, but also for the genuine care and encouragement he provides to his students. One colleague wrote, Dan Stolwell is a builder, student leader in powerful and subtle ways. The mountaintop experiences that students have while participating in Dan's productions are built piece by piece by the students themselves, from the sets to the sound design, dance captains, etc. Students lead the productions with Dan's tutelage. Dan also has the unique capability of making himself transparent and ego-free in his teaching environment. He supports them in such sophisticated ways that by the end, students are convinced that they did it all by themselves And that's exactly how Dan would want it. Mr. Stillwell, as you've just heard, your tireless dedication and consistent commitment to the students and staff at Kaufman High School has truly made a difference. Congratulations on your Golden Shamrock Award.
It really is truly an honor. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I'll tell you just one thing. As I've told my students a number of times, you know you have a really good job when you park in the parking lot, take your key out, put it in your pocket, and as you walk towards the building that you go to every day, most of the time you can't really walk. You want to jog or sprint just to get started because you're so excited to get started for the day. Thanks again.
And for our next award winner, I'm going to ask Mr. Wayne Tsai to come back to the podium to say a few words about our next award winner, Mary Ann Thiessen.
Good evening. Dr. Marshausen, Mr. Kern, the board, thank you for giving us the opportunity to recognize awesome teachers in our district. My name is Jen Clark, and it is my privilege to serve as one of the assistant principals at Dublin Kaufman High School. It's often challenging to find the perfect words to capture just how strong, professional, caring, and knowledgeable the staff at Dublin Kaufman truly are. One shining example of this is Kaufman's Special Education Secretary, Mary Ann Thiessen, and I'm absolutely delighted to present her with the Golden Shamrock Award. Mary Ann is without a doubt one of a kind with a heart of gold. At Kaufman, she's known as the backbone of the special education department. One colleague wrote, "She goes above and beyond for our special education team, ensuring that every detail is accounted for and that we are fully supported in our roles. Whether it's organizing, problem solving, or simply being a dependable presence, she is the glue that holds our department together." I have looked up to Mary Ann personally for years. She is full of grace, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to Dublin City Schools. If you've ever had the honor of working with her, you know her empathy and generosity are second to none. That said, don't let her kindness fool you. She is tough as nails and very tenacious, but she leads with her heart, and that's what makes her so special. She has this uncanny ability to hold people accountable with a perfect balance of warmth and firmness, always direct, always fair, but never unkind. It's truly a gift. To know Mary Ann is to love her. She has been a blessing to our building, and as she nears retirement, we are all feeling a little panicked about how we're going to fill her role. The shoes she's leaving behind aren't just big, they're nearly impossible to fill. Mary Ann, this award is not just well-deserved, it's long overdue. Thank you for your years of dedication, your wisdom, and for putting up with all of us at Kaufman. We are so grateful for you, and congratulations.
First of all, I have to thank God for all his blessings. I want to thank the board for this award, and I want to thank my family. Every career decision I made was based on family, and it never steered me wrong. My kids got an amazing K-12 education through Dublin, and that was where I wanted I support our mission wholeheartedly, and I wanted my time and talent to be spent here. I want to thank my transportation family who came. We did great things. And I want to thank my Kaufman family for making me want to go to work every day. You guys are just an inspiration. Thank you.
I'd like to invite Mr. Sy back up to the podium as we recognize Kaufman's girls swimming team.
Good evening. Our swimmers at Dublin Kaufman High School have made a school a better place because of their character both in the classroom and in the pool. They put in countless hours of practice and preparation. Their performances this year are beyond impressive and stand as an example of what could be achieved when you set a goal and work tirelessly towards it. I would also be remiss if I didn't acknowledge our wonderful parents for their dedication and support as well. Please know that the early mornings, late nights, travel, and resources used to help support your student athletes do not go unnoticed. Allow me to both introduce Coach Mark Brinkbrick and a huge congratulations to him, his staff, and his student athletes on an outstanding season. Go Rocks.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity, school board, to come talk about Katrina here. As a coach, you always have that dream athlete that, you know, sort of comes into the program and you're just like, wow, this girl could do something. You know, she's going to be someone if she really puts her mind to it, you know, because there come swimmers with talent and all this. And then you got that one that you can just see, that diamond in the rough. And as a coach, Katrina was that for me. When I started my career here 4 years ago, she was part of the freshman class that came in with me. What was interesting to just watch her through the years growing as she did. You know, her first year, she swam 2 events, the 200 and the 500 free. So they're the 2 longest events that you can do in swimming, in high school swimming. And I believe her freshman year in the 200, she didn't make states. And in the 500, I think you got the last place award. She got last place, and which kind of, I think, motivated her to sort of see things. The next year, she got, as a sophomore, she got 9th in both events. And then as a junior, she got 3rd in both events. And then this year, she was state runner-up in both events. So when you just see the progression and how she kept focus and kept training and going after that was just very impressive as a young athlete, seeing the things in front of her and how to do it and what she needed to do to get better. I joke with her, and this year it didn't sort of come true for me, but I was always enjoying when putting up a set on the whiteboard of what she would have to do, and she'd just give me the meanest of looks that I don't think I had from any girl I ever dated or saw or this, but they were the meanest of looks of like, you cannot make me do this set, you know, in this, and I didn't get that this year. She was totally focused on her goals and what she wanted to achieve. And getting state runner-up is a wonderful thing. And in the 500 free, her time was so impressive. She made All-American, and which means that you're one of the fastest top 100 kids in the United States swimming for that event. So again, a great accomplishment for what she did and how she went about it and the focus she has. She was also our team captain, so she's got great leadership skills. And all of that, and certainly someone I will miss, but knowing that how she did and how she improved over the years was amazing. She will be taking her career on at the next level. She's going to OU, Ohio University, to swim, where I know the coach is very excited to have her. Her times and her improvement over the last few years has made her that she can be a MAC champion in the coming years. Even next year, I'll put some pressure on her so she'll keep that focus and go. But Katrina Colin. I guess we're going in height order.
Mr. Arn. Welcome.
Good evening, welcome, good evening, everybody. First and foremost, I want to thank board for recognizing all the students tonight, Dr. Marshausen, Mr. Kern. I want to thank the Dublin community. This is probably one of my favorite things to do as a principal, to have the opportunity to come up and congratulate our student athletes and all of our students, no matter what the events are. Why don't you guys come on up here really quick? Come on. That way you're up here so Helen's not here tonight, but you know, this group is a pretty special group at Jerome, and I'm going to let Coach McDonald talk about them here in a second, but I just want to make sure that I say this publicly to all of you. One, I'm going to miss you guys next year. It's been amazing to watch you grow up since freshman to now and all the success you have, and I'm not surprised by your success, but I am impressed by it, and I'm looking forward to hearing about all your successes moving forward. This group collectively is probably one of the most successful classes in terms of their success in the pool at the local and state level. I'll let Coach share what they did at this last one, but I want to thank you on behalf of Jerome, on behalf of the Jerome Athletic Department. Mr. Schwanke had to be at another meeting and also his daughter's banquet tonight, so I told him I would represent for us, but I know he's very proud of you. And without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Coach McDonald. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good evening. Thank you for recognizing these young student athletes, and we really appreciate it. I'm going to get right into this. First, I want to introduce Millie Leonard. She was the state champion in the 500 freestyle. Like Mark said, Katrina was the runner-up. Dublin's known from the distance perspective as a distance club or distance community. So it was really neat to see how not only each of these schools within Dublin represented each other, but also had good competitive fire and pushing each other all the way. So Millie, as mentioned, state champion in the 500, breaking the school record at the same time. She's been a stalwart and a backbone of the program for the last 4 years, and I wanted to wish her well in her academic and her swimming career going forward. She'll be attending the University of Tennessee next year. So congratulations. Like Mike said, we've got three. We're missing one, unfortunately. The family's recently relocated to California, so she can't be here. But again, a vital part of our 200 medley relay that again finished second at the state championships in the runner-up position, and that consisted of Millie. She's a senior. She'll be moving to the University of Tennessee. Helen Randolph, who is another senior. She'll be going off to University of Houston. We've got Emma Bowman, junior. She's here representing us tonight. Not only is she an accomplished swimmer, but she's also an accomplished dual sport athlete, part of the junior national team for trampoline and gymnastics. And then we have Olivia Matson, again, another senior that's leaving us, but a distinguished swimming career. She's going off to Florida International University. So congratulations, girls.
All right, I'm back again, and there's a cavalcade of them about to come in behind me. Again, I'm here on behalf of Jerome and Mr. Schwanke. I'm also here as a parent tonight, so I'm happy to do that and excited to do that. But just like our swim team, these young ladies here of our cheer squad work really hard. And the thing about winter sports a lot of times is that they practice a lot and they're out of the building, and then all of a sudden you don't really see them until they actually compete. So this group had another successful season. I want to thank Coach Crawford and Coach Sybeck and Coach Bookmeyer for being here. If you know anything about the program, a lot of times the seniors lead all of this stuff. So Mrs. Crawford's not going to tell you about the team, but Ella Bender and Lucy Glotz are going to share that with you, and then we'll share them all around and shake their hands. But I want to congratulate, ladies, I want to congratulate all of you and thank you for all your hard work. I'm appreciative of how you represent Jerome and all the hard work you put in each and every day. So thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Lucy Glotz.
And I'm Ella Bender. On behalf of the Dublin Jerome 2024-25 cheerleading team, we would like to give a sincere thank you to our superintendent, Dr. Marshausen, and the Dublin City Board for inviting us here tonight.
This year, all 3 of our competitive cheerleading teams were able to qualify for the OASSA state competition. Since September, we have worked hard on choreographing, perfecting, and performing each routine. And with thanks to our amazing coaches who pushed us to be our very best this season.
Our first team, Gigi's, was able to take its 9th state championship title in a row this year. Gigi's routine consists of fast-paced dance, jumps, and motions. We had a total of 35 cheerleaders in this routine.
Next is our team in the Division I building category, Stunt. Stunt worked tirelessly since the beginning of the season to advance our group stunts, which consists of 2 bases, a back spot, and a flyer, working together to build a skill. This team required each stunt group, as well as the team as a whole, to build tight bonds with one another and develop strong group chemistry. We learned how to work as a unit in order to hit our stunts. Stunts routine also performed tumbling skills and jumps, in addition to our elite stunt sequence and 2 pyramids. Stunt took home first place at the state competition.
Finally is our smallest team with 19 members on the mat, Gold. Gold competed in the hardest division, the Division I non-building category, and took home runner-up at the state championship. With the routine made up of some of the hardest level acrobatic and tumbling skills, this team certainly put in the work from day one.
We are honored to be standing here today in recognition of our achievements and the incredible season we've had. Thank you again to our coaches, family, and supporters, and to the Dublin City Board for your continued encouragement to our team. Thank you.
Lucy, hold tight for Scioto. Go to the side.
I was about to cry laughing.
Back and over to watch Scioto. We're going to watch Scioto. Yep. You guys go this way. We're going to watch the pyramid. Ready for Scioto first, and then we'll go up. Yep.
Mr. Cochran.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tom Cochran, and it is my honor and privilege to be the principal at Dublin Scioto High School. Tonight, we're going to honor a special group of young athletes as they were the state runner-up in the cheer competition, February 23rd at Big Walnut High School. It was my honor to watch them on that journey. We had a walkout for them, a clap out, which is a tradition at Dublin Scioto High School. When anyone is going to go to the state competition, we clap them out with our drum line and our band. And it was a great way for us to honor all of them because they do so much for our school, just building that foundation of spirit and community. And it was our honor to wish them the best. They went there and competed at a super high level. Mr. Magistrali, who could not be here for another meeting, but Mr. Magistrali and I got to see just the support of the community and the parents, who many of them are here tonight as well, and these girls just knocked it out of the park. At one time, the lights went out, and they just kept going with their routine. It did not faze them at all. I have to say that I'm biased, but it was the loudest performance by them and by our fans, and it is just one of those great things to see when all that hard work over the years for a lot of these girls has paid off with that runner-up competition. It was just awesome to see, and thank you for all that you've done for our school and all you've done throughout the years for you seniors, for the 4 years that you've been here. So thank you very, very much. So join me in giving a round of applause for our state runner-ups. And one last thing, we have a wall of honor where they will be having their picture up there again for the second year in a row. And there's one thing I did forget. I want to introduce the coaches as well. Miss Hannah Kerr is in her first year. So in her first year, she brought home a state runner-up award for our girls. And then we also have Miss Avery Evans and Miss Angela Hochstatter as well. So thank you very much for all the hard work they've poured into these young athletes.
I got him. Okay, moving on to presentations. I'd like to welcome Mr. Scott Melody with a tolls update, please.
Good evening, Dr. Marshausen, Mr. Kern, members of the board. It's a tough act to follow with all the presentations and awards tonight, so it's an exciting time of the year, spring. So I'll have a brief update for tolls this evening. First of all, update on the current enrollment. We are currently enrolled 1,025 students. We started the year at 1,108, so down about 75, 80 students for the year. That's typical throughout the year as people move and switch programs and go back to homeschools in that aspect. Looking forward to next year, so far we have enrolled 800 new students for next year into the programs. That combined with the junior class that will be rising, there are about 1,400 students we expect to have next year. So year over year, that's an additional 300 students we expect to serve next year going in the tolls. So we're excited about that. We're also excited to be bringing back a senior-only career tech lab, and we are bringing back an electrical program. Based on the need of the community of electricians, this will be a very popular program. There, on the chart there was the current enrollment for people accepted into the programs for next year. And then continued work on the facilities expansion. We had an executive session and work session last week where we continued to work on the design elements and finalized in an additional outbuilding for storage and space for welding and construction. And some additional storage for like the fire engine in that aspect as well. Looking forward to some upcoming dates in the spring. On Wednesday, April 23rd is the annual school board recognition dinner. So you're all invited to come join us and see and learn about some of the programs and see the students, and the culinary students will prepare a wonderful dinner. And then finally, on May 19th and 20th will be the senior recognition certificate programs. Those will be housed at Tolles, and this will probably be the last year that we are able to have those programs in-house at Tolles at ceremony, just because we're outgrowing the auditorium there to host that. So we are looking for external space to host that for next year. So with that, I will conclude my presentation and see if there's any questions. All right, hearing none.
One question,
Oh, go ahead.
and if you can let me know later if you don't know the answer, but when does the applications for next year, like, how long is the process, or how long do they have to be accepted into the program?
If they applied and were accepted to like a junior program, those notifications have gone out, but there is still a lot of churn if people got their first choice or didn't get their first choice, or there's moving parts in there. So as openings come up, they'll continue working down that list and try to fill all available spots, and they'll do that throughout the summer as well as there's change in the programs as we're notified.
Okay,
Did
thank
that answer?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you, and I'll see some of you tomorrow morning at the BAC meeting as well. All right, have a good evening.
Thank you, Scott. Moving on to public participation. This is public participation for action items on the agenda, and there is no one signed up for this evening. So we will continue to move on to Board of Education committee reports.
I have a report. It's like 1.5 reports, I guess, really. The Academics and Student Learning Committee met on February 26th with Mrs. Marple and her team and Chris Andrus. Mrs. Marple shared, and her team, I should say, because they were all there, shared some items that we will see in upcoming, basically April, Board of Education meetings for board approval, including K-12 Science, K-12 Health, K-12 Counselor Framework, a single course called Advanced Integrated Mathematics, and a presentation on all-day kindergarten, which will, I'm assuming will be led by Mrs. Marple, but that will just be a presentation for approval. That will be the first meeting in April. Gina Seaman gave an update on the ELA MyView support plan. There will be training for instructional coaches in April, and then a 2-part training for teachers. The first training will be a company training, and the second training will be a deep dive with instructional coaches. Jennifer Hinderer gave an update on the pathway programming. The district has submitted 26 CTE applications to the state, which would be a great opportunity for our students to earn seed tag credits. The district is working on writing pre-apprenticeships, which would allow students to get real-world experience while in high school. The district is also aiming to have 6 teachers trained and certified to teach CCP courses, which would be a benefit for our students as well as the district. Natalie Henderson gave an update on virtual enrollment trends. There are currently 28 courses in DCS Virtual. No new courses were added this year, and only courses that had 15 students or more were rolled out. Summer enrollment opened on March 3rd. Mrs. Marple and Dr. Schwanke discussed changes to the 612 master schedule. There will be a new bell schedule for high school and the addition of mods. Emerald Campus will have a 0 period now. Middle school advisory will now be an extension of first period. Kathy Parker-Jones discussed how teachers and students use AI to enhance learning but not replace learning. And Christina Hutchinson also gave us an update on pre-calculus data. And Lori Marple and Chris Andrus gave us an update on recent legislation and next steps for the district. Also on March 4th, Mrs. Marple hosted a parent input meeting for the health curriculum. She gave an overview of the curriculum review process and explained that the health curriculum is in phase 1 of the process, which is vision and graded course of study. Health is the only content area in Ohio that doesn't have state recommended standards, but there are laws around certain topics that must be taught either inside health education or outside of it. Mrs. Marple gave an overview of how the vision and GCOS are created and proposed health topics for elementary, middle school, and high school. Parents were asked to give feedback on the K-12 health vision, the health topic, and the health topics for each level. There were also guidance counselors and teachers from each level there to answer questions on the vision, the health topics, and the drafts of the GCOS. Teacher work teams will finalize the GCOS drafts, and they'll be presented to the board in late April with final approval in May. And implementation is set to begin in fall of 2025. That was a lot, and I hope I got it all.
I also have a report from the Communications Committee, and it seems that Cassie and her crew, small crew, have their hands in pretty much everything that the district does. So spring is their busiest season, and it seems like it. So they are taking care of everything from kindergarten information night. They do public records requests, which have been increasing. They said that they get, on average, 8.5 records requests a month, which that has been increasing over the years, which obviously those add to costs for the district that we need to be mindful of when people ask for public records. Helping with the campaign around screen time and cell phone use with Dr. Marshausen, and setting up the new Bishop Bears and getting them up and running, high school redistricting, and they are also helping design the Behavior Task Force guidebook, as well as anticipating questions that they might be getting from the community, including things that might not be from the district, however, do affect our students, such as the DYA fee changes and City of Dublin fee changes. And then they also work with our alumni and are putting together our Hall of Fame nominees, 50-year reunion, and the all-class reunion. And so, yeah, just everything. And I haven't even mentioned community champions, dodgeball, military commitment. They basically, if it's done by Dublin, they have their hand in it. So they are amazing, the three of them. So I just want to thank them for being so well organized and putting this all together.
Okay, I will, I'm going to turn it over to the student representative, to Frankie, but I do want to tee him up a little bit because one of the things that I had the privilege of doing last week, I think, was attending a meeting that our student representatives had with Dr. Schwanke, Dr. Marshausen, Mr. Andrus, and myself, and they gave a presentation that was just knocked my socks off. I mean, it was great. The content was fabulous. They gave a very compelling argument to the things that they were asking for or changes they would like to see made, and they were all wide-reaching and really will affect, I think, in a positive way, the school district and all of the students. So I just want to thank you again for the time that you all put into that and for an outstanding presentation. And with that, I will give it to you.
Yes, thank you, President Rigby. Actually, at the end of my update, I'm going to touch on some of the things we talked about. But good evening, reps. Currently, starting off at Kaufman, we have our dodgeball prelims this Wednesday at 7 p.m. in the auditorium, and our dodgeball pep rally is next Wednesday, right before spring break. We also have the SAT for juniors next Tuesday. We don't have anything for Jerome tonight, but moving on to Scioto. Student Senate partnered with OSU to successfully host Dublin-thon, which supports pediatric cancer research at Nationwide Children's Hospital. Along with this, Scioto had their Dublin-thon pep rally, which featured students which featured a Students vs. Teachers basketball game. At Emerald Campus, Dublin Teacher Academy, or DTA, students achieved notable success at the recent Ed Rising Conference, earning awards in 5 distinct competitive events. And going back to that, I think it was 2 weeks ago on Friday the 28th, the senior reps and I had the privilege of meeting with Dr. Marchhausen, President Rigby, Dr. Schwanke, and Mr. Andres at Roto before our Superintendent Advisory Council meeting. The representatives and I discussed data we received from our student surveys, as well as general student and school concerns. And I'm just going to touch on some of the main points we talked about. The main points we talked about were the short length, is the short length of the left turn lane on Emerald Parkway during peak school hours, which can be very, very stressful. Consistent phone policies across the district, academic workload and student mental health, college application materials, and possible professional theater pathway. We were able to have a great discussion, and we plan to meet soon with the city to help address our concerns with the light, possibly implement family nights to help with student morale, as well as meet with other district members to talk about a possible professional theater pathway. And then overall, we found this meeting extremely beneficial, and we are excited to keep moving forward with our ideas, and just want to thank Dr. Marchhausen, President Rigby, Dr. Schwanke, Mr. Andres again for letting us present that to you. Thank you.
And we do have a confirmation that the city will meet with our student representatives, with their traffic engineers, to talk about your concerns with the light. So I had that conversation with City Manager O'Callahan. Once we get through the state of the city for them this week, we'll be setting up a date for the 4 of you to meet with our folks from the city so that you can share your concerns, and hopefully we can get a resolution for that.
Any other questions? Okay, moving on to reports and action items from the superintendent's office. Dr. Marchhausen.
Last Monday, we had a visit from our newly appointed Lieutenant Governor, Jim Tressel. He came to Griselle to help celebrate Ohio's 222nd birthday. It is so much fun to watch the Lieutenant Governor with students. He truly loves kids. And for him, I bet he took 200 selfies and got his face painted. And my favorite story from the day was when he was talking to the student council at Griselle, and he asked, how do you get on student council? And the students said that they ran for office, and one of the young ladies said, well, I was unopposed, so I just got to be here. And he said, well, it's kind of like how I got to be Lieutenant Governor. So just the authenticity, and thanks to Sean Kaiser and the staff at Griselle for everything that they did to make that event fun. And thanks to Dublin's Mayor, Chris Ambrose Grooms, for joining us as we represent Dublin, and we welcome new state officials to see the amazing things that our students and staff do here in the Dublin City Schools. As we talk about politics, budget hearings are underway for the state budget. When we look at what the state budget means for a lot of districts in Ohio, that is deeply concerning. When we look at what it means for the Dublin City Schools, we see a slight increase in our funding. When we talk about what it is that is leading to that increase, it's our increasing enrollment and the state minimum funding remaining the same. So we will continue to advocate for that minimum not going down and for the minimum staying where it is. President Rigby and I had the opportunity to meet with Senate Education Chairman Brenner, who indicated he'd like to see that go up as a minimum for the districts that are seeing increasing enrollment. So we would like that too. I'm not holding my breath, but we would like to see that minimum funding go up as well. As we look at what the U.S. Department of Education is doing and the guidance, as we talked about in an earlier meeting, executive orders come. Following the executive orders, you get the guidance and FAQs from the U.S. DOE. We received that. Some of the things that we received in that I'll be touching on a little bit later in the report. And then that works its way down to the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce, who again will provide more clarity and guidance. want to just make it clear that we are not directly funded by the federal government. The federal government provides its money to the states, and then the state governments in turn distribute the money to the localities, the LEAs, the local education agencies within each state. So as we look at where that money comes from the feds, and I know there's some concerns about the U.S. Department of Education being sunset in the coming period of time. If that were to happen and those federal dollars came to Ohio, and if they were funneled through Health and Human Services or funneled through the Treasury, however those block grants would get to the states, that would ensure that the states would continue to get that title money. And the title funds in those programs were specifically authorized under separate congressional action in the 1960s. So as you look at where that title money would come from, it would be anticipated, even with a sunsetting of USDOE, that those federal dollars would continue to make their way to the states as we support, in many cases, our most at-risk students, not just in Dublin, but across Ohio. Ohio Department of Education and Workforce is continuing to lobby for budgetary changes. One of Director Dakin's big focus areas is workforce readiness and creating as many pathways as possible. As we heard in an earlier report from Mrs. De Silva, we have 26 applications in for those CTAG courses and those pathways. We are so blessed to have Jen Hinderer and the team here at Emerald Campus and to have the resources to bring 3 large suburban high schools together and be able to marshal the energy and the student populations for the 3 of them to be able to offer such a wide variety of pathways for our students. We continue to work with ODU. Director Dakin and his staff have been here several times, and we are often the model that they call on when they have questions on how something would work. We get calls. How would you do it in Dublin? So it's exciting to be that district that we get those calls. We also continue to work with our legal counsel to ensure that we are following all state and federal laws and the requirements that come along with those laws. Along with that, there are several laws that are going to require us to be mindful of how we do things in Dublin. We met with our council today, me and Dr. Schwanke and Mrs. Marple, to talk about a compliance review to ensure that we are in line, both at the state and federal level, with the Parents' Bill of Rights, with the expectations when it comes to our DEI programs and where those programs stand as we move forward. So our commitment and what we would like to be able to share with the board is a comprehensive checklist and review of everything from policies to curriculum to handbooks to web pages to PD, and to have that to you within 90 days. So 90 days from now takes us to the June 9th board meeting. It's approximately 3 months. So we would like to go through that checklist. Dr. Schwanke and I will sit down and look at each of the areas that our legal counsel has identified that needs reviewed, go through, appoint a kind of point person for each area, work with counsel when there are questions, whether what we're doing is where it needs to be. And you can see here some of the areas, and some of them are things that we don't always think of. When we look at what are the expectations in regards to hiring from our vendors. Mr. Stark doesn't know this yet because our meeting was this afternoon. We'll have to look through some of our vendor lists to make sure that our vendors are following the expectations when it comes to making sure that how they do their hiring is in line with the laws and requirements for us at the state. As we go through this, we'll continue to keep our board members informed. But I think that with everything going on, it is going to take a little bit of time for us to go through everything that's on that list. So a goal of, without objection from the board, a goal of June 9th to have that checklist completed and ready to go. The other thing, and for our 2 members on our policy committee, this allows us to know where we are in advance of the need on July 1st for the Parents' Bill of Rights policy to be adopted by the board with all of the parent notifications and to make sure that we're in line with all of those procedures as well. So there's going to be a lot that goes into that compliance review. I think, once again, we're ahead of everybody else. This is something everybody else is going to have to do, and they're going to have to do it before July 1st. We're going to get out ahead of it, and we also will be keeping an eye on some pending legislation with the anticipation as we follow and read the tea leaves. If there are things that will be hitting us in terms of pending legislation during the summer months, if it looks like it's going to pass, we probably need to be prepared. One of the things that Frankie mentioned in the governor's budget proposal, it's to take our ban on cell phones from K-8 and make personal communication devices banned in public schools K-12. We need to be ready to make those shifts and amendments if that looks like it's going to be in that budget proposal. And a budget would be passed before the end of June, as the new fiscal year would start in July. So we want to be out in front of those things so we're not chasing ourselves as we come down to that. So planning ahead, great relationship with council, great team, and we'll be ready. There are times when we have all this politics.
John, real quick, if
Yes,
you
sir.
don't mind going back, how much action do you think that, because some of these are obviously board action type items, things that we've approved, and others are things that are part of daily operations. As you look at this in the conversation that you had with legal, how much potential action are we talking about having to do, if any? And I know from our previous discussions that we are in a good spot, and for those areas that where there may be concern, we've taken a look at, but there's quite a lot here that, in terms of the scope and the potential areas, not necessarily that's in place.
I think there are two things, Mr. Valentine. First of all, and I am grateful for the 5 of you, and it kind of goes to where my next slide was going. We haven't changed a whole lot. We didn't politically change what we do in Dublin during the previous administration in a lot of areas, so we don't have to undo a lot of the things that were done. We intentionally tried to stay in the middle of the road and stay focused on kiddos. So that puts us in a place that we're not going to have to make the changes that a lot of districts are going to have to make, but there will need to be some changes. There will need to be some changes on the policy side when it comes to the Parent Bill of Rights and writing that policy and having that in there. There will have to be some potential changes as we look at how do we issue contracts. Some of the changes we make naturally in our goal cycle, and I'll get to that in a second. We're going to have to go through, one of the things we talked about today are cached websites and cached pages. And when you go through and look at what may have previously been done in 2020, 2021, to make sure that those caches aren't there. So if people search for things, they don't find things that are no longer applicable to what we're doing. And they may have been applicable at the time. But, and then how do we also have to save those because they're public records. And if they involved instruction or they involved things, we can't delete a public record, but we also don't need to make it available on the website. So you're right, there's a lot there, but I do think we're in a better position than a lot of places because we stayed focused.
Dr. Marshausen, this looks like a lot to have to go through. And especially then also having legal counsel look at a lot of it. Any idea of what this will eventually cost the district?
When we talk today with council, some of the things that we're doing, the cost will end up being divided with other people because we tend to ask the questions first. So we've had conversations with one of our neighboring school districts, and their superintendent and I were on the phone over the weekend talking about when we look at Parents' Bill of Rights and what it means in K-3 instructional materials. and the changes that by April 9th we're going to have to do in some of those K-3 classroom libraries. We won't be the ones billed for all of it, because when we look at legal counsel, it'll end up being split among a bunch of different districts. When I look at that list, our specific questions in that list will depend on how many questions that we have. And once we start getting through the understanding of what it means, some of it we'll be able to do on our own, some of it we'll want to run past council. So, yeah, there's going to be a cost, and there's going to be an hourly cost of legal advice as we go through this. And I think one of the things when we talk to the General Assembly, we talk to lawmakers, a challenge becomes is the unfunded mandate and what we have to do to get in compliance with a law that seems like it shouldn't be difficult. But when you get into the complexity of a district this size, and you look at everything that we've done, and when you look at where we are when we flip from one political party being where they are to another political party coming in, and the changes in what's expected of us, we want to make sure we do it right. So I am mindful every time I call legal counsel, but I'm also mindful of what a lawsuit costs. And if it costs us, and I can tell you in June how much we've spent on this project, if you would like to know that, because it is quantified as we go through this. So I can give you the total in June of how much time we used counsel for this, and I could tell you that would be a fraction of what it would cost if someone filed a suit that we weren't in compliance.
And that's not even including the man hours then of the administrators that are working here, and
Yes.
how much their cost is.
Yes. And I would say, I think you talked about the public records requests. And Cassie and I have talked about the fact that the public records requests have really changed political leaning over the past several years. But every time there's a public records request, it's not just Cassie's team. It's the technology team. It's those of us sitting around this table, because most of the time the requests are of voluminous documents, and where are they? And then someone's got to go through and redact them. And there are times that we've just had legal counsel and we've paid one of their clerks to redact them, because for Dr. Schwanke and I to sit down and go through or Cassie to go through and line item out names and things just becomes not practical. I know there are people who take pride in being disruptors, and they want to disrupt things. When you disrupt public education, you harm students. It's that plain and simple. If you've got a problem with the laws that are being passed, go disrupt the GA. All those of us sitting around this table can do, board members included, is follow the law. We don't get to pick which laws we follow the law. So when the laws change, we got to get ourselves in line with the law. And if you look at, Mrs. Rigby and I met with Senator Brenner about Senate Bill 113. If Senate Bill 113 and the companion bill in the House becomes law, it's going to cause a review of all of Ohio's curriculum in certain fields, including where you are. So as we do those types of things, we teach our kids E plus R equals O. There's an event. We've got to respond. We do it the best we can to achieve the best outcome that we can. And we do it with all of the external things that go on around us.
I have that same question that Mrs. Messick just asked, but I also have many, many more questions about all of this. And you're not going to be able to answer them right now, but I just want to say that I do have fundamental basic questions just about the definitions of some of this and how it's interpreted, and what's the operational definition for some of this, like discriminatory equity ideology, what does that what does that mean? What does a lot of this actually mean, and how is legal interpreting it? And I see some things on here that are, if we didn't have, would be an absolute ethical situation to not have, like cultural competence for one. So I have just lots of questions that legal will probably have to answer, but I just want to put that out there.
Okay.
I just had one or two questions. On the curriculum and materials, I think you already answered this. It will be both classroom and library materials. I mean, we're talking all of it, right?
I think there are two different definitions as we talk today. There are instructional materials, and then there are library materials. Those in the law are different. Now, we talked today that classroom libraries would be considered instructional materials. So if it's something that is in a classroom library, that would be considered an instructional material. If it's something that is in the school library, that may not be considered an instructional material. But those are the types of definitions that we as a district are going to have to work through as we work through this list, is where do those different pieces go?
Okay, and just back to the cost and the expense. On the flip side, some of these things, if enacted, could be a cost savings. I mean, it's not all just about how much we're going to spend, but we could be looking at what we're doing differently in the district to save resources, to save costs in some of these initiatives that, are now changing, correct?
There are a series of supplemental contracts, stipends or supplemental contracts for the equity leads. Stipends. There are a series of stipends that may not be part of the plans moving forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Valentine asked a question, and I want to come to this. We spent an awful lot of time intentionally building a culture. And Mr. Valentine was part of that conversation when we first built our culture playbook. And I've been struggling a bit with how to balance all of the things that are coming our way from the outside. And I was starting to write some things about how to clarify it, and I woke up on Sunday morning and thought, wait a second, we already have this. We, as a district, work on building culture every day, not by what we write in a district, one of those districts that does press releases and resolutions, but it's what we do, what we promote, what we permit every day. We've spent 3.5 years starting with a culture playbook and having thousands of people involved with Journey 2030. We have outlined what our 3 values are as a community, and this doesn't change depending who's in the White House. It doesn't change depending whether it's Jim Tressel or John Husted serving as our lieutenant governor. This doesn't change regardless of things that are passed by the Ohio General Assembly. Our values and core are things that we do on purpose. And as I was thinking about these, and I called Dr. Schwanke on Sunday kind of with that aha, it might have been Saturday, kind of with that aha. No, we take responsibility. We are always growing. We learn from successes and failures. And there have been some people who have said, you need to go back and condemn what you've done in the past. No, we don't. We learn from what we've done in the past. Those of us who sat in these seats in 2020 and 2021, we made the best decisions we did with the information we had available at the time, just like we're going to do now. And I don't think we go back. I think we go forward. Because you passed, as a board, unanimously a vision that says the Dublin City Schools will ensure that every student is prepared for success. And we talked about in our mission that we do this in partnership with families in our community as we do the journey. This is what we do. And as we go through this process, we have 4 foundational areas that we look at, and we look at every year. And you just got a mid-year review on a 12-month cycle. And Dr. Schwanke, you want to talk about what our principals asked for when it comes to our goals?
Right. So typically we take the Journey 2030 goals that this team writes and we put them in front of the principals in May. And then over the summer, they develop and write goals for their buildings. Last year, they shared, well, it doesn't feel great to have district goals handed to us. We'd love to have some input on those. So this year, we're going to add a stepping stone before it gets to you. We will draft our goals, and then in an April management meeting, we will workshop those with the principals. And so they'll get input on them before they're finalized for them to build their building goals, which then filters down to the teachers, which is probably your next point.
Yeah, because there are a lot of organizations that are $350 million operations with more than 2,000 employees, where if you ask employees what are their organizational goals, they have no idea. And what I would say for us is most of our teachers probably don't know our district goals, but they really do, because our district goals are our building goals. And our building goals are what principals use to set the goals with the teachers. So as we look at teachers and the goals they have in their classrooms, they are aligned stepping up to their building goals and to our district goals. And everything we've got here, and Cassie gave me like all of the things we have from Journey 2030 to our safety playbook to our athletic, it's all aligned. And as we look at what it means for kids and what it means for us, all those events out there, we really try to respond to them with skill and focus on what we can do. And, you know, Mrs. Messick, it's going to be a lot of work for us to go through this process, and there's going to be costs for us to go through this process. But I can look out at Mrs. O'Connor, and I can look out at our teachers, and they're going to be teaching in their classrooms, and they're going to be doing their thing because they've been doing their thing while we've all done the other stuff, and that's what's most important, is for us to be able to be the filter, be the ones, that's our response is to make it so that our teachers can teach each and every day. And part of that is to be fiscally responsible. You know, if I were going to put a qualifier on that, we want to prepare every student for success. Using the resources available in a responsible way, we want to prepare every student for success. Because I think any of us who are educators would say a third grade classroom of 15 is ideal. But if we were going to have 15 kids in every third grade classroom, we would have to build 9 more buildings and hire, you know, another 450 teachers, and we don't have the money to do that. So using the resources available, we prepare every individual student for success as we move forward. And I just want to stay focused on that because we've done stuff in the past. It's my 20th year as a superintendent. If I could go back every year, there would be a list of things that I would do differently because we learn and we get better and we grow. But as we move forward, we want to be able to move this district forward. So I just wanted to share kind of as a review to our community who's watching and to be able to share that we don't do this culture work by mistake. We do it on purpose, and we do it for when times are the most difficult. It's when your culture and your values are the most important. And we're in a difficult time. So I think we need to keep reminding ourselves. And sometimes, even as the guy who's been doing it for a decade, I have to remind myself, we've got a playbook for what we do, and we do it really well in Dublin. So questions, discussions, anything that I can provide answers to. Okay, there is one recommendation that is under my report, and that is the approval of that revised policy, which will allow you later to approve another recommendation on those caps for intra-district open enrollment.
Okay, since this is a second reading, Dr. Schwanke, you don't have anything to add, right? Okay, it's recommended by the superintendent that the board approve the attached revised policy 5113.01 on intra-district open enrollment. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Messick, second by Mrs. De Silva. Questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Messick?
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis?
Yes.
Mr. Valentine?
Yes.
And Mrs. Rigby?
Yes. Motion passes 5-0. Reports and action items from the Treasurer's Office. Mr. Kern.
Just a few items on the agenda this evening. We do have 2 donations this evening. We're always grateful for those, and I think those are pretty self-explanatory for those. We do have in item D there, approval of a resolution accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Budget Commission. This is something statutorial that we do every year. It has to be required and approved by our board and then sent back to the Franklin County Auditor's Office. But it starts the process for the next tax year, which will be, if you remember, taxes are levied a year behind. So this starts it for next year, which would be tax year 2025, collection year 2026, as those run on a calendar year basis. And then finally, we have the approval of the February financial report. As you can see, for the most part, we are in line with estimates at this point of the year. Hopefully, maybe by the end of March, but maybe as we get into April, I know I always talk about this, we'll get final settlements of our real estate taxes from Franklin, Delaware, and Union counties, hopefully so we can see where we're at for our estimates for the year. Of course, we'll be starting the budget process for us internally from an expenditure standpoint as we go. As you know, 85% of it is salaries and benefits, and so the responsible staffing plan is really the guide when it comes to majority of the expenditures, but everything else is, you know, building by building per the allocations that we have, which are, just for everyone else out there, is you know, done by enrollment at the buildings, but also by what needs they have at the building, whether they have more special ed teachers there, whatever it may be, the differences between the buildings, we kind of do that from a building standpoint, and then departments who I would call do a modified zero-based budgeting, kind of using last year's, past couple years expenditures, but also finding what do we actually have to do in this next year to spend, you know, to keep the district running, whether it's Mr. Stark's office and operations, who's probably a lot of that what I call non-payroll expenditures between the utilities and maintenance and different other things. So as we start that process here pretty soon, so that's where we're at. Any questions?
You have a question? Okay. There being no questions, it is recommended by the treasurer that the board approve items 7B through 7D. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Valentine. Is there a second?
Second.
I'm sorry, second by Mrs. De Silva. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis?
Yes.
Mrs. Messick?
Yes.
And Mrs. Rigby?
Yes. Motion passes 5-0. Reports from the Department of Academics and Student Learning. Dr. Schwanke.
Okay, I'll start us off with the annual intra-district enrollment capacity resolution. This comes to you in the every year in a March board meeting. You'll see there that the only schools that will be accepting intra-district transfer applications will be Wyandotte and Scioto. You'll also see a change this year recommended by our legal counsel at Weston Hurd that any schools that are subject to redistricting will not accept intra-district transfer applications. That is so that redistricting happens because we anticipate growth. So to allow intra-district transfer applications for schools we know are growing is a little bit counterintuitive. So you'll see a couple there with double asterisks where if you do the math, you'll see they should have space but we're not going to allow applications because we know they're growing. Any questions on this annual resolution? Okay, and just so you know, the applications go up on the website April 1st and close on May 1st, and no applications beyond Wyandotte or Scioto will be approved. I'm going to turn it over now to Mrs. Marple.
Good evening, Board. At a time when federal funding is a topic of interest for our community, Mr. Andrus and I thought tonight we would share some examples of how Dublin City Schools uses federal funding. So first, I'll start off by sharing about Title I funding and programming in Dublin. Title I is a federal program that provides supplemental federal funding to help ensure all children meet state academic standards in schools within the district who qualify based upon free and reduced lunch headcounts. Dublin makes the decision to focus our Title I programming in our elementary spaces. We know that using funding in early intervention spaces will have the most impact within our district. And when you consider the amount of funding we have compared to our overall budget, that is why we focus it in the elementary spaces. We do that in 4 areas: staffing, instructional supplies, professional learning, and community engagement at our 4 Title I buildings, which are Daniel Wright Elementary School, Hopewell Elementary School, Old Sawmill Elementary School, and Riverside Elementary School. So that first bucket I mentioned was staffing. There, we are able to staff math support teachers in our Title I buildings. These teachers provide small group numeracy intervention and instruction for students throughout the school year. The second bucket I mentioned was instructional supplies. These are centered around district goals, supporting the whole child with a focus on literacy and numeracy. This could look like some extra math manipulatives for students, resources for those math or literacy support spaces, maybe more decodables for students to bring back and forth to school. Our coordinator, Brittany Deschler, works closely with the principals of these 4 buildings to make purchasing decisions in alignment with title requirements. The next bucket was professional learning. Last summer, Adrian Mendoza worked with our staff on high-impact strategies to teach math to English learners. We also used the funds to make sure that our math support team is properly trained. Just this week, our math support team will be engaging in PD, during which they will watch a colleague provide instruction to a small group. This kind of instructional PD skills that team and allows them to reflect on the instruction they see and the student response to that instruction. These PD opportunities are available in part because of Title I funding. And then finally, that last bucket was community engagement. The goal here is to strengthen connections between families and schools. So tonight I'd like to share 2 examples of how our schools have used their community engagement opportunities to be transformative in their community. At Riverside Elementary School, Jacqueline Pallone worked with her title teachers to offer mornings for each grade level where students could bring a family member to school for breakfast. Teachers selected a math game for each family, and the students and their guests enjoyed playing the game, learned how to play that math game over a light breakfast. At the end of the event, those students were able to take that game home and add it to their collection at home to strengthen that home-school connection. At Hopewell Elementary, Susan Wittig worked with her teachers, and really her whole staff was engaged in a family literacy night in January that was beach-themed. And the hallways were absolutely full of families engaged in a variety of literacy activities that support that homeschool connection. They also have a themed numeracy night next week, and that one will be a fun math carnival theme. We know that all of our buildings are committed to serving students, but I appreciate the opportunity tonight to highlight some of the work in our Title I buildings. Are there any questions from the board?
I have one question on the information you just shared. It seems heavy on the math supports, you know, from the federal funding side. Yep. Can you just explain why it wouldn't be more so for literacy?
Absolutely.
Or equal amount? Or?
So when using title funds, it's supposed to be above and beyond what the district already provides. And we have, for many, many years, provided literacy support for our students. But math support teachers and small group instruction in that space hasn't been something that has been staffed across the board. Okay, thank you. I'll pass it to Mr. Andrus.
In 1975, I'd like to make a note that that was before I was born, the Education for All Handicapped Children Act was passed with the purpose of ensuring that our children with disabilities in our country receive the services that they need. In 1990, it was renamed the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. So you hear me say that quite a few times, Mrs. Rigby. And there was a promise to fund 40% of the implementation at the federal level. So each year, Dublin receives what we call IDEA Part B. And if you ask me after the meeting, I'll tell you what Part A and Part C are, but not right now. Funding to spend on students with disabilities. These funds go from the federal government, as Dr. Marshausen said earlier, to Ohio, and then using a funding formula, Ohio distributes that to local school districts. This year, we received about $3.8 million of IDEA Part B funding. And because sometimes grants can be tricky, we use these funds in 3 simple ways. So the first one, or about 86%, is for staff. We fund the salary and benefits of 18 intervention specialists, 10 classified special education support staff, and 4 special education administrators. The second major area, or about 12%, is what we call purchased services. These funds go to support students that require something very unique or special. So for example, a student who might need a really intensive hearing impaired program that's outside the school district, or a student who needs a very intensive behavioral and mental health separate school. Finally, at about 2%, a proportionate share goes to non-public schools within district boundaries. And for us, the only non-public school that wishes to participate in the IDEA grant is St. Bridget. And that's why every summer we ask the board to approve a contract for services at St. Bridget, because we're the fiscal agent for that proportionate share. One important part about IDEA Part B is that we need to provide a figure annually called maintenance of effort, or an MOE. MOE is part of the law that basically says you can't spend less next year than you spent this year on special education. So our MOE number for last year was about $48 million, and that includes the amount of state and local dollars spent on special education. So if you add the 48 million with the 3.8, 4 million if we're rounding, that IDEA Part B is about 7% of the special education program costs. And I've said this before, I couldn't be more proud of the services and supports that we offer here in Dublin. And as you can see, based off of the 93% that the state and our local taxpayers pay, we couldn't do it without the state and our support from the Dublin community. Thanks.
Moving on, we have one approval for that aforementioned intra-district open enrollment. So it is recommended by the board to approve the attached intra-district K through 12 annual capacity resolution for the 25-26 school year. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mrs. Gillis, second by Mr. Valentine. Questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Gillis?
Yes.
Mr. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Messig?
Yes.
And Mrs. Rigby?
Yes. Motion passes 5-0. Reports from the Department of Operations, Mr. Stark.
Good evening, everyone. I have a few things for your approval tonight. Items A and B kind of go together, so that is, we have a lot of roof work to do. So over the next few months, I'll be coming to the board for all types of amendments with our designers and public bids. And that's because in the early 2000s, a lot of our roofs were done, and they had a lot of them were done with a Garland manufacturing system that had a 30-year limited warranty. And you know how limited warranties go. So what we started doing, if you remember, with Dare Run is we hired Mays Consulting. It's an engineering firm, was done really well by us. And what they've done is these assessments. And their assessments look at our roofs and say, does our limited warranty fit this? And at times, they have found where the limited warranty does fit, stay on the warranty. And other times, they found things like the insulation is wet and the limited warranty doesn't cover that. So it's best just to replace the roof. And that's something we did at Dare Run. Many of our buildings, I know it's confusing when you think of a roof, you think of it's one item, but for example, Kaufman has 27 roofs, and some of our other buildings has, could have 15, 20 different roofs. That's just where the roofs are at. So there's a lot of work that goes into which roofs need to be replaced and how they're connected. So the board approved Mays Consultant to do a number of assessments last summer. And the first one that got done was Davis. Davis was already due to do part 2 of their roof this year of a project we started a couple years back. And they found that the warranty wasn't holding up, so we combined that into one effort. And we're starting to prepare now for public bidding for 2026, next summer. And as they're putting together Kaufman, Wyandotte, and Griselle, we noticed there was 2 roofs on Kaufman that really can't hold off for another winter. They just can't. And these roofs are, one has a skylight attached to it, and one has a set of windows. And both sets of windows need to be replaced, which means there's quite a bit of engineering where the roof hits the windows. So Mays Consulting tonight, we have an amendment to their assessment contract to pay them to design this new piece, and also to put together the public bid documents, because we're going to, put together the RFP documents, because what we're asking for is an urgent necessity, which means we're asking the board to bypass the public bid process because of the time it takes, and summer's here in 90 days. But we would still do an RFP, which is a request for proposal, which means we're still going to get 3 prices. With RFP, you pick the best value. We'll put together a scorecard, and we will show that to the board, I think, at the first meeting in May. And if everything's successful, we will do those 2 parts in Kaufman now. Next month, we'll be presenting to the board more amendments to this Mays contract to allow work to be done at Griselle, Wyandotte, and the rest of Kaufman. And that's to design it, put the public bid documents together. We'll probably publicly bid that out later this year. So that's there. I also just want a thank you to one of our staff members, Justin Edgington, who's our operations head of facilities. We have a lot of leaky roofs sometimes when it rains, and Justin is just all over the place. We couldn't do it without him, and I just want to give him a public thank you for that. Next up is our approval for resolution for guaranteed maximum price number 1 for South Addition. So this is very exciting. This is with Robertson Construction. Their head executive project, Clay Keith, is in the audience. I want to thank Clay for putting this together. This is no easy project. We're doing this on a much actually aggressive timeline than the Jerome project, because this one actually started a little later. So to put the numbers together, we're probably going to have possibly 3, maybe even 4 GMPs, because this is kind of like building a train while the train is running. So this GMP is going to most primarily is for site work and for early procurement. Early procurement are those items that have a really long lead time. We want to get them in now. So that's for some like HVAC equipment and electrical distribution panels and things like that. So that is there tonight, and that's for approximately $6 million. If everything goes correctly with the city and we get our permits on time, we're hoping to actually break ground the first week of April, and we are still on track. We have a couple of obstacles, but we're confident we'll get past those. And our last one is to replace 3 scoreboards, 1 at each high school. So the purpose of this is not to replace the full sign, it's just a scoreboard inside. And it used to be scoreboards did not need to be publicly bid, but we found out some changes in the state office that it does need to be publicly bid. So when we publicly bid things, we usually like to hire a designer and to put together all the electrical specs and everything else so the bids are together. So Mark Ford, who has worked with us in the past and done a real good job, and Mark is actually, in his proposal, a subcontractor of his is AEC Engineering, who the board has hired directly to do a lot of our electrical work and all of our fire panels. So it's a really good team. And part of his proposal will be he will meet with Mike Allring and the athletic directors to find out what they're looking for. And our goal is to put together 3 basically identical scoreboards. Our current scoreboards, all of them are over 10 years old. Some are close to 15, 20. And it's a technology piece. And as the technology wears out, it's harder to replace parts. It's harder to keep up the software. And we've had problems with all 3. So this will start this out, and we will we will get a public bid out for this later this year. Our goal is to replace all 3 this calendar year. Any questions?
It is recommended by the superintendent that the board approve items 11A through 11D. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Messick. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. De Silva. Questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Messick?
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis?
Yes.
Mr. Valentine?
Yes.
And Mrs. Rigby?
Yes. Motion passes 5-0. Reports from Human Resources. Mr. Boney.
Good evening, members of the board. I'll start tonight with our certified agenda, and I'd like to highlight just some of the administrative changes that you'll see on the agenda, and I'll give you just a brief summary. It starts with Kate Brundrett, who is leaving her position as an assistant principal, and she's going to return to a classroom in Dublin. Erica Stone is transitioning from her role as Dublin's EL coordinator to be an assistant principal at Indian Run. And then Brittany Sappel has been offered and accepted the position of assistant principal at Daniel Wright Elementary. The last item in this particular section, Mr. Sockleben will transition from his position at Sells Middle School to a high school assistant principal in our district. March is that time of year we bring administrator contracts to the board for approval. One recommendation is listed first on the agenda, and then there are several that are contained as an attachment to this particular agenda. And these are all listed by the length of contract eligibility. So some administrators are eligible for 3 years, some are eligible for 2 years. We do have 3 certified resignation and 5 retirements. I'll briefly go over those. Ron Bookmeyer will retire from Jerome High School with 25 years in Dublin. Jeremy Bradstreet is going to retire from Kaufman High School with 22 years here. Don Bush from Scottish Corners with 29 years in our district. Donna Mizuk will retire from Indian Run Elementary with 26 years in Dublin, and then Donna Porter from the DCS Preschool with 23 years in Dublin City Schools. The hire that's on tonight is the same person I mentioned earlier who's being hired into that certified role, Kate Brundrett. This is also the same agenda each March where teachers who receive a 1-year replacement contract, they're notified they do not have a contract for next year. We're going to hire most of those positions back next month when we bring all limited contracts that are up for renewal for you to review and approve for those current certified staff members. That'll happen in our first April board agenda. There are a few leave of absences for next school year that require your approval that are also in this section. And then all the supplementals that are on tonight's agenda are for spring athletics, and then we do have one now that's also for fall as well. Moving on to our classified agenda, you'll see 5 resignation and 3 retirements. And just briefly, Cindy Anson will retire as a clinic aide from Riverside Elementary. She has 23 years here. Deborah Borman, bus driver with 24 years in Dublin. And then Carrie Harrell as a building educational attendant and crossing guard has been with us for a total of 26 years. And then there are 6 new hires and then just a few salary changes on tonight as well. We don't have any stipends tonight for your approval, so that concludes HR section for tonight.
Brian, comparatively, and Donna, I don't mean to throw you into the discussion, but as well, where are we in terms of the number of retirements for teachers at this stage? We kind of talked about it a little bit, and the numbers being high and being higher. I'll deflect to Brian, but obviously you're 30 right now. Okay.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Chris, I mean, we're much higher than we typically have been. I'm finishing my 10th year here, and Donna, I don't think we've ever had a year with this many retirements at this point. So okay. I think some of the changes in STRS has accelerated the folks that have decided to opt to retire now, but we're much higher than we have been.
Awesome, thank you.
Any other questions? It is recommended by the superintendent that the board approve items 13A and 13B. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. De Silva. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Valentine. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Mr. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis?
Yes.
Mrs. Messig?
Yes.
And Mrs. Rigby?
Yes. Motion passes 5-0. Items for future board discussion or future agenda items. Anybody have anything? No. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. De Silva. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Valentine. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Meeting is